So let me follow up. I listened intently to your testimony, and I got a summary of some of the responses you have given while I was away. I'd like to get, if I can, a little more granular, because we're really trying to think about how do we support those of you who are on the front lines in a meaningful way. And I've heard, for example, Mr. Lopez, you said support, the activists for freedom, not just civil society. In what ways? Because sometimes we hear, oh, if we support A, B, or C in a country, it's going to be the United States that is trying to create a subversive, response or a overthrow of whatever that existing tyrannical government is. And so there's that question that's always raised, well, we shouldn't do that too much. On the question of the internet, of course, part of our challenge is that for the internet to be free and open, you still have to be able to receive it on the ground in the country that you're in. We have this problem with Cuba, where we'd like to have, I've been advocating for a free internet and thinking about satellite transmissions and other ways, of course, circumvention technologies that we use. But that then gets into the question of, can you just beam into a country where there are other international conventions that suggest you can you get the receptions on the ground? So just by way of example, when you say support those who are fighting for freedom, give me a tangible, what would you, if there was an A, B, or C, is that about economic resources? Is that about greater access to our surrogate broadcast? If you can help me, I'd appreciate it.
Well, research shows that supporting civil resistance and nonviolent movements has been proved effective. And what this means is supporting the possibility to provide training, massive training, simultaneous training to activists under autocratic regimes. And training in civil resistance methods, in nonviolent methods, in communications, in movement building, giving the capacity, the confidence to activists on the ground that they are not alone, that they can have the capacity to organize and to extend that organization. In 2 weeks, we will launch what we have called the Global Freedom Academy from the World Liberty Congress. This will take place in Zambia. We will start with the training of the first cohort of African activists that will be trained in these issues. We have taken the best practices from all of the research and the information of what works in terms of providing strength to movement building. And we have a moonshot idea to train in person 1 million people in the next 3 years in countries that are autocratic. And this will give confidence and the capacity to mobilize. And I can tell you firsthand that this works. We have done this in Venezuela. We have created networks of activists, men and women, that are committed for the struggle for freedom. And this is why there is a difference between the development type of support that Mr. Wilson was talking about to the freedom type of support that we are talking about. This needs to be decisive, and there needs to be no fear in supporting the movements and the people who are willing to put their lives at risk to provide change. We will be always confronted with the accusations of regimes. They will accuse any activist of being a spy of the US, of being a terrorist, of being influenced by the United States or the organizations of the United States. I remember one day, Damon Wilson asked me, are you afraid that you will be signaled as being supportive of the United States or being part of this network? And I said, they are always going to say that. They always say that, whether you receive the support or not. So it's critical that that support is received.
Let me ask you about this. You mentioned that in your opening statement that sanctions need to be rethought. In what way? Because sanctions is one of the few peaceful diplomacy tools we have to get a country to rethink how it's acting or to try to move it in a different direction. How, when you say to be rethought, what are you thinking about?
Well, we have seen recently in Venezuela a massive scandal of corruption. And it's very clear now to the Venezuelan people and beyond that the problem in Venezuela is not sanctions. We have heard over and over that the crisis, the humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, is a consequence of sanctions. And this is simply not true. In the year 2019, before the sanctions were imposed, the Venezuelan economy had collapsed by more than 60%. More than 4 million Venezuelans had fled the country at that time. So it was not because of sanctions, it was because of mismanagement and corruption. And today, we believe that sanctions should be focused not only on government officials, because the government structure is only a facade to the real political economy, to the real power structure in our country. So when we are talking about sanctions, we are thinking of targeting the enablers, the individuals, the companies that are behind this kleptocratic network of corruption that is providing support to the dictatorship. And we also think that there needs to be some multilateral thinking of how to apply sanctions, because Maduro is linked with Lukashenko, is linked with Putin, is linked with the mullahs from Iran. So there is a transnational kleptocratic network that also needs to be targeted in an effective way. So that's what we are thinking in terms of reproposing sanctions.
Thank you. It's very insightful. I have other questions for our panelists, but let me turn to Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr.